Hello. Dark and Stormy is still on vacation for the holidays, and I'd like to introduce Ang Pompano and the Noir Before Christmas. Enjoy.
The Noir Before Christmas by Ang Pompano. It was 3 days before Christmas, just past 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the sun had already vanished behind the Litchfield hills, bringing my spirits with it. Outside my second-floor office window, snowflakes the size of quarters drifted under the glow of a flickering street lamp. I had a view of all 7 buildings on the other side of Main Street and the handful of souls who braved the chill air. A man in an ugly reindeer sweater slipped into the barber shop. A frail lady, wrapped in layers of scarves and coats, walked a huge mastiff, the dog's breath forming frosty puffs. 2 teenagers strolled hand in hand. The sign on the antique mall in the converted axe factory down the street made me yearn for the days when I gazed from my old office window at the distant Hollywood sign in L.A. I favored the lights of Hollywood Boulevard and the sight of streetwalkers outside the Star World restaurant over the carolers harmonizing in front of LaSalle's Market. The stark contrast between the thrill of Hollywood and this quiet village did nothing to uplift my holiday spirits. As I watched the teen lovebirds start across the narrow street, I thought of how there was nothing of interest for a PI in my boyhood town of Collinsville. That's why I left Connecticut 10 years ago. But then Detective Frank DeWile of the LAPD made it more than clear that it would be best if I set up shop back home for a bit. DeWile and I were friends, at least until I inadvertently connected his boss to a call girl ring. One thing led to another, and the mayor had to resign. But not before a bullet from his gun grazed my head, giving me a permanent part in my curly locks. I was told to lay low until the trial came up. With my luck, that would take a couple of years. The kids stepped out into the street, then paused as the most amazing car I'd ever laid eyes on sped down Main Street with a roaring engine that echoed through the town. It screeched to a halt, then reversed into a parking space right in front of my building. The car's sleek and curved design with its rounded cockpit and long hood and teardrop fenders made it both sinister and beautiful at the same time. It must have been 75 years old, if a day, black and shiny as polished onyx. A Bugatti Atlantic Coupe. The only place I'd ever seen one of those babies was on a calendar. The priceless vehicle was beyond sweet, and it didn't belong on the street on a sunny day, let alone during a snowstorm. If my interest had been piqued by the car, the stylish woman who stepped from it made it skyrocket. She wore a fur-trimmed coat that would send a PETA supporter running for the paint can. Her boots were black and thigh-high. Her statement handbag and oversized sunglasses spoke volumes, high-end fashioned indeed, and I doubted if she was there to get a grinder at LaSalle's. Seeming not to notice the 2 teenagers peering in the windows of her car, she walked toward my building and came in. Through the open transom, I could hear her footsteps come up the 2 flights. Then a decisive knock at the door. "It's open." She swept in like she owned the place. "Mr. St. Martin?" I gave her a chair and leaned on the edge of my desk. "Call me Mike, Miss..." "Jean will do for now." "Okay, Jean it is, for now. What can I do for you?" On her finger was a rock that violated light pollution standards. A tasteful black dress peeked out from under her coat. I pegged her for someone from down Fairfield County. I know the type. I call it New York Light. I'd like to engage your services, but let me be clear. If I entrust you with the case, discretion is crucial. Was she serious? Mike St. Martin doesn't get interviewed by clients. He interviews them. Yeah, well, as much as I'd like to be engaged, I'm kind of up to my eyeballs in work right now. She looked around the sparsely furnished office. Her eyes stopped on a folding table with a half-finished game of solitaire. Yes, I can see. Her tone fell somewhere between condescending and doubt. She got up, walked to the window, and peered down at her car. I'll have to get it washed. Those kids are getting fingerprints all over it. It's a Bugatti, isn't it? You know your automobiles. I hope you know your job as well. I didn't say I was interested in the case, but how discreet. $25,000. 25 grand. For money like that, I could be the soul of discretion. What's the gig? I need you to find something of mine. What is this something I have to recover? I mean, if I had the time to take on the case. She lowered her eyes as if she was looking for it on my floor. It had been a while since I'd swept the place, so anything she might find there was probably covered in a pretty good layer of dust. It's a video disc. I'm assuming it's a video disc that your husband would be less than happy to see on YouTube. A boudoir tape, intended for my husband only. You shocked? Envious of her husband, maybe, but not shocked. In the age of texting? Nah. Good. Look, if you want me to help you, I need some facts. Such as? Any idea who might be interested in your movie career? She reeled off and slapped me so hard my teeth clapped like castanets. I hate when I let my guard down. What was that for? For making it sound like something it isn't, and for whatever else you were assuming. And she sat down as if nothing happened. The man who has it is called Melvin Burke, she said. He somehow got his hands on the DVD, and now he's blackmailing you, right? Yes, something like that. How did he get it? From outside came a sound like a screaming banshee, and she leapt from her seat. Those kids, they must have rocked the car. I have to go. I'll be in touch. She hurried from the office. I stood on the landing, listening to her footsteps go down the steps. I didn't say I'd take the case, she yelled up to me. I said I'd be in contact, Mr. St. Martin. And the door slammed. When I got back to my desk, I found an envelope marked for expenses. Inside were 10 $100 bills and a business card with the name Melvin Burke, CPA. I guess I was taking the case after all. Burke's card had his home address and phone number. The phone had been disconnected, but I went to check out the address, 141 Palmer Drive in Bloomfield. When I left Collinsville, there was just enough snow to make driving miserable, and by the time I reached Palmer Drive, 12 miles away, it was coming down in a heavy clip. I cursed the ex-mayor of L.A. I needed a case in Beverly Hills, not in Bloomfield. I pulled up in front of a vacant 60s-style ranch house. Next door, an elderly gentleman pushed a snow shovel along his sidewalk. He seemed to welcome the excuse to take a break, and I gave him my card. I explained I was looking for Burke. Detective, huh? I'm not surprised. What'd he do? I'm a private investigator, not a cop. I'm just trying to locate him. It's of a personal nature. It always amazes me how some people will open up to a PI about their neighbors. I think it makes them feel important to be in possession of exclusive information. The guy told me Melvin and his wife broke up a few months back and they abandoned the house to the mortgage company. And first she moved out and then a few days later he did. So you don't know where he lives? I didn't say that. I asked the driver of the moving van where the stuff was going, just in case I ever needed to get a hold of Melvin. Great. Can you tell me where? The old man glanced at the unshoveled sidewalk. Not off the top of my head. I have to go inside and look. I ain't much good at remembering stuff lately. You know what I mean? He glanced at the snow-covered driveway. Look, let me shovel some of this here, then you can go inside and look for the address. The old man nodded and went into the house. I saw him peek out the window a few times, but he didn't come out until the driveway was finished. You're done? You didn't have to do that. Here, I wrote the address down for you. A Hartford address. I probably could get there in a half hour. As I headed down the newly shoveled driveway toward my car, the old man called out, Don't tell Melvin I said anything. The guy's kind of touchy sometimes. It was about 9:15 when I found Melvin Burke's building a few blocks from the state capitol in Hartford. The neighborhood reminded me of East LA, but with snow. I knocked at the door of his first-floor apartment. A slight guy with thick glasses answered. He had a baseball bat in his hand. I tapped at my gun under my jacket, and he laid the bat down by the door. Melvin Burke? Who's asking? Mike St. Martin. I'm trying to locate a video. What am I, Netflix? My client wants her video. Now. He laughed as if someone in his head was telling him a joke. That wouldn't be a woman named Jean, would it? Do you have the video or not? I have it locked away for safekeeping, and it's going to stay that way for insurance. Insurance against what? Rich people who make up their own rules. Did she tell you I was her husband's accountant? Well, that was news to me. And I'm not going down alone on this. I remember seeing his eyes go wide, and then the room went white for me. When I woke up, he was lying on the floor under the Christmas tree. A gun was next to him. My gun. He didn't look well. In fact, I'd seen rice with more color. The hole in his gut didn't help. Burke! He tried to tell me something, the blood in his mouth making little bubbles. Coffee. Desk. Then he let out a deep sigh. As last words go, I'd heard better. Coffee is my drug of choice too, but I hope it's not my last request. I heard police sirens, and I didn't want to be around for any questions I didn't have the answers to. I took the gun and then used a handkerchief to open the window by the desk. There was a commotion in the hall, and I climbed out. I glanced back and noticed a mug with the words Globe Gym on the desk. It struck me that Burke was trying to tell me to take the mug. I reached in and grabbed it. I got to my car just as a second and then a third cruiser arrived. Back at the office, I fiddled with the mug as I weighed my options. I had a half a mind to keep Jean's grand as a hazard duty pay and forget the job. But the other half of my mind reminded me that my gun killed Burke. I noticed 4 numbers written in white paint on the bottom. 03-15-10/36. A production number? The Ides of March 2010? But 36. I decided I was due for a trip to the gym. The next morning I headed down there, and $10 later I was in possession of another Globe Gym mug. 2 matching mugs. For me, it was the equivalent of a fine set of china, except the new one had no numbers, which told me the digits weren't a manufacturing code. Someone came to the desk and said he'd forgotten the combination to his locker. That's when it clicked. That 03-15-10 might be the combination of locker 36. I headed for the changing room, and sure enough, number 36 opened with that combination. I peered inside. Nothing. When I got to the parking lot, I spotted an older lady peering into her car with cupped hands. "Excuse me," she said, "I locked my keys in the car. Could you help?" "Why not?" I took a lock jack from my trunk and stuck it between the door and the window and popped the lock. She thanked me and offered me money, which I refused, and her gratitude quickly turned to suspicion. "My lands, you're not a car thief, are you?" I didn't want to tell her a Jimmy was a tool of the trade for a PI, so I said I worked for AAA. "You should get a little magnetic box for a spare key," I told her. I put my hand in the wheel well to show her a good place to hide it. She thanked me and drove off. At least I did a good deed. Nothing else was going right. But as I pulled out of the parking lot, a lot of the synapses started to fire off in my head. I made a sharp U-turn and barely missed a box truck. I ran back into the gym, and I opened locker 36. Taped under the shelf, I found a video disc. Now, to get it to Jean. I'd known Billy Saloki since high school. Even then, he was only happy when he was up to his elbows in grease. These days, he's doing well running his own garage outside Collinsville. "I'm trying to find a woman who drives an antique Bugatti. Did she ever come in here?" "I don't remember a car like that. Did you try the Bugatti Club down in Greenwich?" I shook my head. "She's not the car club type." Won't hurt to give it a shot. I knew Billy was right. I looked up the Bugatti Club, then headed for the Gold Coast town of Greenwich, where every home was a gated mansion. I found the Bugatti Club located in what had been a stately house on Putnam Avenue. Out front, as if posed for a calendar photo shoot, there were 3 cars with the Bugatti badge, a convertible, a sedan, and a coupe, all decorated in festive lights. My hopes soared that my trip wasn't wasted. Inside, I found the youngish woman behind the desk and told her that I was trying to find a certain Bugatti owner. Are you a club member? No. I'm afraid I can only give information to club members. I'll join the club then. Excellent. Are you a present or former owner of a Bugatti? No, but I have a Bugatti calendar. She smiled and I noticed a picture on her desk. Is that your wedding picture? Yes, that's me and Lee, she said. Look, I have to level with you. There's this woman that I would love to know. See that look on your husband's face? That's how I felt when I saw her. We met at a club and we talked, we danced, and we really connected. You know what I mean? And she was about to give me her address when one of my buddies got into a brawl. Well, I went to help break it up, and when I got back, she was leaving. And I saw her driving off in an antique Bugatti. And I wanted to find her to apologize and, see if we could take up where we left off. Why don't you do an internet search? I would, but I only know her first name, Jean, so I thought I'd take a long shot and see if Jean belongs to the club. I pointed to the wedding picture. I want a chance to be like him. I could see her face soften. Lee and I almost didn't connect. We met at Daytona and never exchanged numbers, and he came back the next year hoping to run into me. Oh, well, then you know how I feel. Of course, she said, but I can't help you. I'll get fired. I had to be careful not to be too pushy. I understand. I guess I just wasn't meant to be. I turned and I walked toward the door. Wait, you can't give up just like that. I mean, for her sake. What if Lee and I had given up? I'd have missed out on the best thing in my life. We have to hurry before my boss gets back. You said her name was Jean? Right. That's all I have. Like I said, I don't even know if she belongs to the club. She gave me a knowing look. Bugattis are so rare, they keep a database of every Bugatti that's registered in the country. The owners are always hoping someone is selling one, even if it's just to get authentic parts. She punched in a few things into her computer. Okay, her first name is Jean, and you said the Bugatti was from the 30s? What model? Long hood, rounded cockpit, doors like a Piper Cub, big round fenders extend beyond the hood. Huge wheel wells in the back with full skirts. Oh yeah, a fin, a really thin seam from the front to the back with rivets. That sounds like a Type 57 Atlantic, about 1938. She put in more information into the computer. Here we go. There are 3 here in Connecticut, but they all belong to men. One belongs to a Mr. David Philbin of Guilford, another to a Mr. Nick Stanley of Kent, and a third to a Mr. Edward Novello of Farmington. I left with her good wishes and a readout. The guy from Farmington seemed the most promising because it was the closest to my Collinsville office. I did a search on my phone again, and Mr. Edward Novello of Farmington came up. Spouse, Jean Adler Novello. I did the 80 miles between Greenwich and Farmington in under an hour. In distance and in attitude, Farmington is to Greenwich what Santa Barbara is to Beverly Hills. It's just as filthy rich, but a lot more relaxed. I pulled up to a holiday-decorated columned portico of a massive Georgian colonial on Oak Hill Drive. The Bugatti was parked in the front of the garage alongside a Prius. I figured the Prius belonged to the maid. I rang the doorbell expecting staff to answer. At first, I didn't realize it was Jean. Her hair was darker, and her face was very stern. Do you have the video? I pulled it from my jacket pocket. Right here. Why the hide-and-seek game? She stepped outside coatless in spite of the cold air. We walked away from the house into the circular drive. I told you, discretion. I would have contacted you. Did you know Burke was dead? I didn't have time to ask. The front door opened again, and a vaguely familiar middle-aged man walked toward us. Is there a problem, Jean? Then it struck me. Ted Novell, probably one of the most recognizable men in the state, thanks to the corny commercials that he starred in for his construction company. I should have made the connection when I got the readout from the Bugatti Club. Edward Novello, Ted Novell. Mr. St. Martin was just about to leave. Jean's tone made a winter air that much colder. Novello eyed the video in my hand. What's this about? I hired him to recover a certain video. At first he seemed puzzled, then a wave of realization swept over him. Give it to me. The lady hired me, I'll give it to her. I handed the DVD over to Jean. It dawned on me why it was so important to get it back. I guess your husband's been taping more than commercials? I told you it was a boudoir tape, Jean said. Enough of that. Give it to me, Jean, and don't say another word. She reluctantly gave it over. She doesn't have to say a thing. I figured out that she's not your co-star in the video. I had felt honor-bound not to look at the disc before returning it to the lady, but I was certain I was on the right track. Pay him and get him out of here, Novello said. Huh? Did he think I was the pizza delivery boy? I held up a finger. 1, you can't dismiss me. I held up a second finger. 2, there's the murder. Murder? Burke. My accountant? Burke is dead? Novello looked truly shaken. I don't know anything about a murder. Somebody here does. Jean? There was anger in Novello's voice, but I also got the sense that he was clueless. I turned to Jean. You were keeping tabs on me last night. You set me up. Then you killed Burke so you wouldn't have to dump him as your lover. Something like that, she said. You had an affair with my accountant? Jean, really? Her husband gave a dismissive laugh. Apparently, the part about her killing someone escaped him. You have your fun. I thought it would be justice served. But then Burke got that video from one of your girlfriends, she said. Novello shook his head. We could have paid him off. He'd have made copies, and it would never end. Besides, he got the idea that I'd divorce you to go with him. Can you actually believe that he thought that I would marry him? With these people's attitude on sex, it didn't make sense that Burke had to be so scared over an affair. Then I remembered that he said rich people make their own rules, and he wouldn't go down alone, and I couldn't resist giving my take on what was really going on. This time I addressed the husband. It was a little more than just playing footsie. I think if you have your books checked, you'll find that Burke was siphoning money from you, and he wasn't doing it alone. Novello looked at his wife in disbelief. You and Burke stole from me? How much? She shrugged as if he had asked her how much she had spent on a new dress. $250,000, maybe half. But why? You have no restrictions on what you spend. She answered without emotion. The woman must have been part robot. I didn't know he was stealing from you. At least not at first, she said. Later, it became a game. You didn't miss the money. Then I foolishly told him you planned to announce your run for Senate, and I paid him and broke it off. So, Novello was running for the Senate. That explained the politically correct Prius. Well, that should have been the end of it, he said. But it wasn't. He immediately thought I was going to turn him in for cooking the books. That's when he threatened to sabotage our campaign by selling the tape to the media. They'd have a field day. I had to stop him. But he disappeared. That's why I hired Sherlock here. You should have let me do my job, I told her. I couldn't be sure you wouldn't resort to blackmail too. That's why I followed you to Burke's. As soon as you found him, I was going to pay you and send you away. I figured I could reason with him on my own. But the door was ajar, and I heard he had already started to tell you too much. That's when I hit you with the bat. He grabbed your gun, and I thought he was going to shoot me, and I tried to get it from him. And that's when it went off, and I panicked and ran. You'd only seen me with a wig and didn't know my name, so I never thought you'd find me. Well, you said you hoped I knew my business. I did. I could see in Novello's face that he was trying to process the information. I can't believe this is happening. I don't need this. Not now. Not ever. Novello lurched toward Jean. I pulled out my gun. Leave her alone, I yelled. He dropped his hands. I motioned for Jean to come by me. She walked toward me, tears running from her eyes. I'm a sucker for a woman with tears. Now everyone is going to chill a minute, I said. I fixed my gaze on Novello. To show her appreciation, Jean knocked the gun from my hand and ran. With my attention diverted, Novello scooped up my .45 from the driveway and held it on me. Don't be a fool. You had nothing to do with killing Burke. Put the gun down, I said. You don't think I'm going to let a two-bit detective get between me and the Senate? With scruples like that? He'd make an excellent politician. Okay, now what are you going to do? Shoot me, I said. Let me think. I could see the anguish in his face. The guy's hand was shaking. Not what you want to see when someone has a gun on you. I felt for the guy. It's not often that you witness a person's world collapse around them without notice. Okay, well, you have the opportunity to kill me. Do you have the resolve? I'm betting you don't. And I'm betting that you're not a killer. Shut up, he said. He lowered the gun a bit. A good sign. I'd hate to be in your place, Novello. I'd like to know where I stand, to know the consequences of my next move. Right now, you don't have that luxury. He raised the gun, and I was sure that I had talked myself into a bullet in the head. Chances were, this time it would be more than just a part in the curly locks. Without warning, the Bugatti roared to life. I flew through the air and landed on the cold driveway. Although I was dazed, I was aware of a gunshot, followed by a deafening crash and then screaming. As the world gradually stopped spinning, I realized Novello had tackled me out of the way and fired at the car when Jean tried to run me over. Novello, who was pinned between the car and a portico column, was saved only by the small space between the recessed radiator and the extended fenders. A wreath had fallen and wrapped around his shoulders, and by some miracle, he was alive and climbing out. Jean got out of the car and rushed to him. You tried to kill me, Novello said in a matter-of-fact voice. And you tried to shoot me, Jean said in the same unflustered tone as she removed the wreath from around him. The exchange between the two crazies got even more bizarre. They fell into each other's arms, confident their position would distance them from this nightmarish situation. But I wasn't so sure. I turned away from them as the distant wail of sirens cut through the chilly air. Soon they'd be the police's problem. As my hope of receiving the 25 grand Jean had promised melted away like snowflakes on a griddle, it hit me. It was Christmas Day. And though I knew I'd never receive the $25,000, Novello had surprised me with a couple of gifts that I really appreciated. The first, saving my life. And the second, showing me that maybe there was a place for this PI in Connecticut. I pulled up my jacket collar and laughed because Jean had been right about one thing. The media would have a field day.